Welcome my friends, my name is Alliteration Gaming, aka Levi, aka Red Riot, check the hair. And today, we're going to be doing a kind of first of its kind discussion video where we enter the classroom. Welcome to the dojo. Today, I am Alliteration Gaming Sensei, and we're going to be talking about the Mr. Problem Child himself of the My Hero Academia card game Format Set 1, Jiro Kirishima himself. So, what is there to talk about with Kirishima, and what do we need to talk about? So, quite recently, well, a little farther back now, but quite recently still, we had the first big event of its kind for the My Hero Academia collectible card game. We had a big 1K event in Omaha. This was the first of its kind, as I said, first big event, first, big tournament style event, bunch of people, bunch of cash prizes on the line. Definitely the first, the first real indicator we have of what's coming in the meta. And of course, as you probably know if you're watching this video, the top 8, 5 of them were Kirishima, and then the top 4 were all Kirishima. So how did that happen? Why did that happen? Let's talk about what made Kirishima so dominant in this event and what needs to be done about it per se. So the first thing is, why did Kirishima top? Well, straight up, he just plays amazing universes. This character, let's look at this character. Enhance once per turn, build the top card of your deck face down. You're telling me every cycle of our turns, if we're both attacking, I'm getting 2 free foundations? That's an insane ramp. And then twice per turn, I can pick up any foundation to get +2 or -2 damage. That's also insane. That lets him just be essentially a 7 to 9 hander, string his attacks for free with a card like Coordinated Effort here, and be able to just, most importantly, be able to pick up the perfect block zone anytime he wants, anytime he needs. It is so hard to deal this character damage aside from effect damage and throws and just strings of like 5 to 6 attacks, which is so hard, and usually the kill turns for most decks or be killed on the next turn. And then he can come back with an insane backswing because he can pick up his attacks and give +2 to everything. This character just does it all. This character really just does it all. He just plays really solid gameplay. Especially with a card like Coordinated Effort. Response commit after your block stack resolves, build it face down. This just doesn't let your opponent block your attacks, or you just send them right back to them. And combined with things like throws in the deck, Kirishima has so much damage you just can't stop. You just have to sit there and take his attacks while he gets to block everything in the world for free and not even care. This character just plays amazing universes, and within the context of a big, think about it, you're sitting down for a 6-8 hour long tournament, 6 to 8 rounds of Swiss, a top 8, a top 4 of finals. Like, that is a super long event. And as the day goes by, especially in a game like this where you have so much to think about and keep track of, as the day goes on, you're going to get really exhausted, you're going to use so much of your brain energy, and this character doesn't have to worry about as much. You don't have to sit there and, psychoanalyze your opponent's whole deck, memorize what attack zones they have, look in their discard pile to find what they might swing at you, because you can just be like, oh, you just played a low? I don't have a low in hand? I suppose I'll pick up a low block, right? That just is such a valuable asset to not have to think so hard during a super long stretch out event like that. And especially when you're going to be fighting a lot of decks that you've possibly not fought yet. It's going to be a big event. People will be playing sleeper things. People will be taking homebrews and random things. And like, Kirishima is able to just react and respond so accordingly to those types of situations. Like, it's just really easy for him. He just plays great UFS and is really ideal for a tournament setting. And he's also just so consistent. It's hard for this character to brick. He's so consistent. He needs 2 attacks to send 3 to 4 at you. Like, it's just really easy. Despite being a 5-hander, it's really easy. And essentially, as long as you open your Coordinated Effort, you're just going to have a good game kind of no matter what. Like, your stuff is all just value. You don't need cards working with each other. He just plays amazing universes. So I think that is a big reason why this character dominated this event. Not necessarily because he's the greatest character in the game, even though I guess he is, but not by as much of a margin as I think everyone thinks. I think it is overplayed a lot. But I do think we do have to classify him as the best character in the game, for those reasons. Like I said, it's not as like overwhelming as a lot of people seem to feel or think, but it is definitely a factor. And then specifically his factors that make him so good in a tournament is why he did so well in this event. So I guess with that being said, the next question is, how do we fix Kirishima? how do we address this character? So the first thing I want to clarify is I think the real elephant in the room, technically the real problem child of this situation is our coordinated effort here. Coordinated effort is one of the most insane cards I've ever seen in any card game whatsoever, and I think that some nerf, ban, or errata of this card is what really needs to happen to stop Kirishima from being so dominant. Because this card is just insane in its own right. Like, it's just a very, very unfair card in general. And it just happens to also have really, really, really unfair interactions with Kirishima, because he can build whatever, he can just pick up whatever you just build down. So what do we do about coordinated effort? So I think I don't think we can just ban this card. I don't think that's necessary, and I also don't really want that to happen. I don't want us just banning cards right away. That feels really excessive. However, I would say that it should be response either destroy or remove from the game. That way there's an actual cost to the ability and not just committing it, because committing it is absolutely no cost. For one, you're getting the built foundation in a readied state. Like, committing it literally isn't any kind of cost whatsoever. It's just absolutely a plus to your foundations, a minus to your progressive difficulty, and then the ability to pick it back up with stuff like Kirishima. It's just absolute, and all his attacks. It's just absolutely nuts. So I think if we say response, destroy, or remove from the game, I'm really, really cool with the card existing in that context. If it destroys itself, then they can build another one and do it next turn, which is like, fine, you know? If it removes itself, it's the same situation, but it means we can only coordinate effort 4 times in a game, which I'm super okay with. It also means that it has to take place over successive turns. I don't think that we can make it say flip, simply because of how many things unflip in this game, and that also lets Kirishima pick it up and then build it right back, the same exact one, which at least he needs more copies of it to do that when it removes or destroys itself. So I think doing that to the card absolutely solves the coordinated effort issue in the game. Now, does that completely solve the Kirishima issue? I don't exactly think so. I do still think that Kirishima as a character card should be addressed in some ways. And I have some ideas in mind already for how to bring this character in line with the rest of the cast. First of all, I think we take his once per turn enhance and we make it once per turn during the opponent's turn only. So he's only going to get 1 build per cycle of turns, and I mean, you could make it during your turn only. That part is kind of irrelevant, as long as it's only during one of our turns. I would mainly say during the opponent's turn, because at least that does give the opponent more agency, right, as to how hard he can ramp. Oh, I'm just not going to swing at him for the first couple turns. He can't really ramp. So I'm pretty into that. And also his, it's supposed to be like he hardens when he's going to get hit, when he's like, he hardens when he gets hits and into the backswing. So I think thematically speaking, we keep that tone of the character as well. And then we take the second enhance and we make it once per turn only. Super easiest fix in the world. I think at once per turn only, it really, really, really makes this character like an actual... So the main 2 things right here is that makes this character an actual 5-hander. Because if he gets 2 builds and then 2 pickups each turn, that's minus 4 foundations for picking up, but he's actually building 2. So it's really only minus 2 foundations, making him effectively a 7-hander with 29 health. Then if we're ignoring the fact that we're losing foundations, he's a 9-hander. But with him only getting 1 build and 1 pickup, he's essentially back to just being a normal 5-hander or a 6-hander that doesn't build, right? Which is totally fine. That actually makes the character a real-life 5-hander. So I think that completely encapsulates what needs to be nerfed about this character. Also, so like, I had a couple ideas about the second enhance as well. I think you could take away the +2 or take away the -2, like make it one or the other. But I think that kind of really, really defeats like that hurts the theme of the character, which is what I don't want to do. Because his whole point is hardening is meant for offense and defense. That's his character's whole mantra. So I think once we make that second enhance once per turn, that just fixes it without needing to take away the fact that, like, I like that he can give damage or minus damage, making the hardening for offense and defense. You could argue that him picking it up to pick up more attacks or picking it up to pick up the right blocks still keeps it being offense or defense, but I think just making it once per turn balances that factor more, and it makes him actually, it makes him actually have to think about the things he does during his turn. It makes him actually have to think about the cards that he holds, right? He can't just hold one block zone and then be able to pick up the other two and say, I have all 3 block zones. He doesn't get to do that. He has to actually make some decisions. About what he's doing there. So I think that effectively brings Kirishima kind of in line. But how does it bring Kirishima in line, right? So do we, by fixing Kirishima like that, do we suddenly fix the format? I don't exactly think so. And I think that because there are, in my opinion, 2 other characters that I would put on the same exact scale as Kirishima if he was nerfed in this way. So those characters are Eraserhead and Kyoka Jiro. So what do these 2 characters do? So first of all, Jiro. Jiro is, simply put, the conversation with Jiro is not very big. She's simply just a huge stats deck that is absurdly consistent because of her ability to stack her just to stack her checks. She's so consistent and makes her move so uber unblockable that I think she's actually an insane play into Kirishima, even at the current state. So if you're struggling with Kirishima, I would also recommend you look into these 2 characters as well. But speaking of, if we are going to nerf Kirishima, I think we have to touch these characters a little bit, and that brings the whole format in line. So what do we do about Jiro? So Jiro, in my opinion, is actually like after Kirishima, I think Jiro and Eraserhead are the 2 strongest characters. I think they're both pretty slept on right now. Jiro especially is insanely slept on. Her staff strike turns are just absolutely freaking sane, and she can make them so big and make so many attacks that like there's just not a lot of interaction, and she just can't check bad because of her abilities. So what do we do? What do we do about Jiro? Well, Jiro, I think is some pretty open-ended as far as what we can address about this character. So I think you can take the first enhance and potentially remove the manipulation and leave the other 2 abilities the same. So she gets the information, but she doesn't get to do a ton with it, right? She just kind of, and then she has to actually play other abilities that, can, manipulate her bad checks. She has to actually like combo stuff to make sure that she checks perfectly, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, I just want this there and this there all in one, right? Alternatively, I think that you can take the responses and either make them once per turn or twice per turn. I feel like that might be too harsh of a nerf, especially once per turn. But I feel like that makes her actually have to make decisions on what to pump up, which is kind of what I want her to have to do, rather than just everything is so free and so automatic. It's just free buttons that she can just keep pushing for these free stats. So I think making them once or twice per turn would make it kind of okay. And if that's just like too harsh of a nerf, like I think twice per turn and then remove the manipulation on her enhance brings this character in line in a world where we have the nerfed Kirishima. And then let's talk about the boogeyman himself, Eraserhead. So Eraserhead is an insane character. Eraserhead simply just shuts down so many things in the game because Erase removes the abilities on the opponent's character. So what that does, and why I think it's problematic for like an ideal format that we're trying to do here, because Eraserhead, what he does by existing, even if he's not the best character in the world, his pure existence like locks up the meta so bad. We just like can't take Shigaraki to a big event. We can't take Nomu to a big event. We can't take Kaminari to a big event. There's tons more, but these are just some very, very rough examples, because Eraserhead is just like a character that just shuts us down so hard that we're just like, it's so suboptimal to take those characters because it's an auto lose matchup, because he can sit there and just erase you over and over and over and over again, and you don't get to play your character when you need to, and some decks are just so reliant on that. So what do I want to change about Eraserhead? So what I want to change about Eraserhead is I want him to not be as volatile against those matchups so that we can free up the meta. So I think simply the easy fix to that is we make Erase's response remain in the card pool. If this has to stay in the card pool, that changes everything, because then he has to have an erase for every time he wants to erase you. And also, they're going to stay in the card pool and provide progressive difficulty for him, which is going to make his attacks, it's going to make him a lot harder to block, and it's going to make him being able to string out on you while erasing you a lot harder for him to do. So I think that really all this does is it takes away it takes away all of his silver bullet power and gives those characters that he just like turns off a little more wiggle room. And he also like has to actually make decisions, right? Like, okay, you know, where do I erase here? What do I erase on? What attack is the one I need to erase the character on to get the most value? Since I'm only going to get like, you know, 1 or 2 erases max, right? So I think it makes him less like potent and less toxic in those matchups, but then it keeps the rest of his kit super strong. So when he's in the matchups where he doesn't erase a lot, like his erase isn't that oppressive against those characters, and he doesn't want to just spam erase them, and he just is a 9-hander with a 9-hander who can infinitely recur mid-1 blocks with breaker 1s and gives +2 speed or -2 speed to all his attacks or your attacks. He just remains that. And I think him being that strong against characters where his erase isn't strong against is perfectly fine. I think we can absolutely, leave him at that power level against those matchups while giving those other matchups where he's really toxic against some wiggle room, right? So that is what I want to change about Kirishima and then his 2 friends in the big 3, as I call it, right? UA has the big 3. I think this is My Hero Academia card game's big 3. I think if we nerf Kirishima, then we also bring those 2 in line, then I think we have a completely inline format as far as like every other good character in the game goes. Because as it stands, I would say Kirishima is the best. These 2 are right under him, Eraserhead and Jiro, and then right under them, we have like 10 to 12 characters, like probably even more, that are just like really good, because this game doesn't really have a lot of bad characters right now. I also think that these changes actually like they bring the characters in line without destroying the thematic nature of the characters, right? Because one of the greatest things Jasco did for this game is making all of the character cards feel so much like their in-universe counterparts as far as their personalities and abilities go. But this still keeps them in line because Kirishima still gets to be hardening for offense and defense. Jiro still gets her manipulation and her amplification. She just doesn't get to, she gets the knowledge, right? But she can't do as much with it unless she really works together with other cards, i.e. other teammates, right? Because she's just the information gatherer. And then erase, it makes him actually have to work to keep you erased the whole turn, which if anything, makes him more thematic because of his eyes drying out and it being hard for him to erase for a longer period of time. And I feel like erase staying in the card pool and adding towards progressive, making it harder for him to keep erasing and keep attacking, like perfectly replicates the strain it takes on his eyes to keep erasing. Obviously, none of this is like super necessary. The more important thing is that the card game and the format becomes balanced. But I think it's also important that we maintain the thematic nature of all these characters. So that is what I would change for like a magical Christmas land format, right? If I was the head honcho and I could do whatever I want, that's what I would do. Now, granted, I'm not and I can't. So in the meantime, what do we do against these characters? Primarily, what do we do against Kirishima is I think probably what the question all of y'all are asking, right? Is how do I fight Kirishima in the meantime before these magical Christmas land nerfs come in, if they ever do? So Kirishima, I think, is not exactly the boogeyman that everyone thinks he is. For one, these 2 right here, Eraserhead and Jiro, both have really strong matchups in my opinion into Kirishima. Eraserhead can keep him erased, which means he can't pick up his block zones while Eraserhead is swinging at him, and Eraserhead can erase him defensively so that he can't just keep picking up attacks and stringing them. Eraserhead also has the ability to seal coordinated effort for the turn with one of his erases, which is insanely strong. He can also Night Watch to cancel key abilities, and if you're playing him under death, he can even play Evil Gaze to destroy coordinated effort. So those are a lot of strong things. Evil Gaze in general is a very underrated card against coordinated effort because the floating effect of Evil Gaze to destroy a foundation happens before coordinated effort's response, so that you can go ahead and destroy coordinated effort before they get to respond with it. And then Jiro is another deck that I think is really strong against him no matter how you build it, because Jiro has 2 builds, right? She has the Staff Strike build and she has the Flash build. The Staff Strike build is good against Kirishima because Kirishima's whole thing is, I want to stall and block everything and eventually just kill you on the comeback, right? But Jiro's whole thing is, I'm going to pump my stats so much that they're just unblockable. You're better off just going aggro and trying to kill me, which is not Kirishima's stronger side of his character. So I think the Staff Strike build for Jiro has a really good matchup into him. And then, on the other side of things, the Flash build is insane against him. Flashes are nuts against Kirishima because he doesn't get to interact with them. Playing like 2 flashes and then building 2 or 3 and then passing is an insane turn against Kirishima. He doesn't get to build, he doesn't get to pick up, and he just has to have held the right zones. It's definitely very, very skill dependent because if he does have the right zones for your flashes, he still probably gets to block them, but it's definitely a lot less suboptimal than letting him do whatever he wants. There are other characters that I think are also quite solid against Kirishima. I think that Sero is another, I don't have him on here, but I think Sero is another really, really good dark horse against Kirishima, simply because he makes it really hard for him to block stuff, and you can play a lot of mind games where like, okay, I play this attack, he picks up the right block, I change the zone, do you have the other right block? Also, Sero just has tons of throws and stuff like tape swing that is unblockable damage that can really wear Kirishima down over a while. And to where Kirishima has to be playing cards like You're So Obvious to reset the tape swings, or else he'll just die to this unblockable half damage. Todoroki is another dark horse character I think against Kirishima, because same thing, Todoroki plays all these throws and can pump the damage on them, and as long as Todoroki can just survive those like really aggro punch string turns, he's really able to just like wear Kirishima down after a while. Kirishima is also a character that wants to really, really play the long game, and Todoroki is so fine with that. Todoroki wants to like squeeze by in those first few turns, get into his mid-late game, and then just scale so insanely well. And then again, being able to on-hand cancel or on-demand cancel one of the enhances, like, you know, Texas Smash or Harden Jab or Harden Chop, to stop those moves from letting him string things so efficiently is absolutely insane. I think those are all really, really good strategies against Kirishima, and if you start experimenting with those decks, you will soon very much realize that Kirishima is not the oppressor that everyone believes he is. So guys, that's pretty much the video. I really wanted to go in depth on these topics, why Kirishima is so good, why he's perceived as so much better than he is, how he's able to be countered and fought against, what his good counters are, and then what we can do to fix him, bring him in line with the rest of the meta, and then as a side note, these other 2 characters that I think would also need to change in a world where Kirishima gets changed. Because if Kirishima gets these nerfs and Eraserhead and Jiro remain unchanged, then I think they just become the next Kirishimas. Nerfing these 3, I believe, would bring the entire format in line. Once again, these are only my opinions. I would love to hear you guys' suggestions on other things that could happen. Other things that you think might need to be nerfed to bring the whole format in line if these three scarecrows here were to get touched in the ways I suggested. And I'd also love to hear other ways you think they might need to get they might need to get eroded or nerfed or just handled in general to bring the format in line and into a more balanced state, right? So anyway, guys, those are all my opinions. Like I said, just opinions. I'd love to discuss more on this in messages or in the comment section below. Always super down to chat about this game and chat about what I think needs to happen to make this game as best it can be. I also don't think that, I want a disclaimer that Jasco did not do a bad job on set 1. I think these are like the only things I would touch in set 1. Otherwise, I think they did an amazing job balancing set 1. All the characters, all of the attacks, all the foundations feel super good and super great to play, and I think they just did a stellar knock out of the park job with this game so far, and I can't wait to see what they have in the future. Anyway, guys, that is going to be the video. Thank y'all so much for watching. Thank y'all so much for commenting, sharing, and getting this really, really cool discussion going, because I want to see this talked about more. I want to see what can we do to solve the issues and how can we fight against Kirishima, rather than Kirishima is so broken, I have to play Kirishima or I lose, or everyone plays Kirishima and I can't do anything about it. No. We have answers, we have combatants, we just have to dig deep down and find them. We have to be the underdogs that seek to overthrow the meta in that sense. Anyway, guys, that is it so much. Thank y'all so much, and I will see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.